Thank you, Simana, for the introduction. I will start and then pass the word to Pedro. Yeah, it's true. We are both working together with Interpret Europe in Portugal, and we are also both in charge, let's say, of the National Association of Heritage Interpretation in Portugal, trying to promote heritage interpretation in our country, but also, as you will see, in other countries. So yes, you already explained a little bit of the surprise. We were going to talk about a clip, of course. Of course, you know, I think you know the object. Maybe with this color is easier. Everybody knows what is a clip. A clip is an object that we use, I don't know, to put together some important papers that are all over the place. When we want to put them together, we use a clip, and it's nice and organized. And so today I will speak to you, or we will speak to you about our clip that we have. Pedro? So yes, so we are involved in a very special clip that is connecting countries. So not just papers, but actually 3 continents and several countries. And we will speak a little bit about the beginning of this clip, some characteristics, some facts and figures, some results that we already have, and our plans for the future. So why clip? So clip for us in Portuguese means Comunidade Lusófona de Interpretação do Património, which in English, in a very rough translation so that the same letters appear, it's the community, Comunidade, of Lusophone, so Portuguese-speaking Lusophone, of interpretation of patrimony. It will be heritage, of course. So it's our Portuguese-speaking countries' heritage interpretation community. And of course. So basically we are an informal network, nothing formal, with just a group of people from several countries, not institutions. And what brought us together was sharing information, sharing common problems, and trying to find solutions together. Just so that you know, the community of Portuguese-speaking countries in the world is formally with these 9 countries. And Pedro, will you put, so the total of people that live in these countries is 267 million people. Of course, most of them are in Brazil. I think it's a little bit more than 200 million people in Brazil, then Angola, then Portugal. But even if you are not in these Portuguese-speaking countries, you have many Portuguese immigrants, and you have other communities like in Macau, which was Portuguese a few years ago, like in Goa. So you have even more, close to maybe 300 million people that speak Portuguese throughout the world. Okay, so what connects us with this clip? Our main subject is the heritage interpretation. And we were brought together because we wanted to overcome lack of several things, because, you know, heritage interpretation in these different countries, as you saw, some in Africa, some in South America, it's struggling in several countries. So our main purpose is to overcome the lack of development and recognition of the importance of heritage interpretation in these countries. We have a lack of bibliography, technical documents, training resources in Portuguese. And yeah, sharing the network between professionals in some of these countries is complicated, as you can imagine. We have also a lack of good practices in Portuguese speaking countries. That's one of our necessities. And of course, what some of the original members that initiated this clip also share this common lack of strategies in the different type of tourism, especially in natural and protected areas. So we see that there's different types of tourism, but a lack of good heritage interpretation in some places. So the initial objectives that we defined for this clip was to create a communication platform between the professionals, to try and compilate and then disseminate heritage interpretation good practices and some significant experiences from these countries. We are trying to promote translations into Portuguese from relevant heritage interpretation texts and publications, because, as you know, most of them are in English, some in French, but we find some difficulty in finding translation into Portuguese. Well, of course, some of them in Spanish also, but I don't know if you know, but in editing reality, if you publish a book in Brazil, for instance, you cannot sell it in Portugal. You will have to do a special edition just for Portugal. So we are trying to talk with different editors how we can do this. For example, one edition that can be simultaneous in different countries that speak Portuguese as an official language. And also we are trying to talk about with the authors about the authors' rights that we have to pay in order to be able to translate their works. So this is one of our main objectives. Of course, then we want to organize training courses as the ones with Interpret Europe. We already do some webinars and online training. And try to do this with support from the national entities and some international entities, and to develop resources like manuals or documents and videos that can contribute to the local interpreters and to disseminate heritage interpretation. Okay, so again, continuing with our objectives, we also want to foster bigger collaboration between these countries, like internships or exchange of experiences, trying to promote maybe international projects together. We are trying to, create the heritage interpretation publication in Portuguese, still thinking about if it's a newsletter or a virtual journal, or, something is being discussed. We will think according to the realities in different countries, which one is better for the needs of the interpreters. And to encourage the heritage interpretation work in different places, different sectors, trying to encourage that, especially in the countries that have more economical difficulties and different degrees of education, that to form local working groups that may eventually evolve into more regional groups or national groups in the future. Pedro?
Thank you, Carla. So I will give you a little bit of an idea of what was the story of this network and the results and what we want to do in the future also. So this is an old idea from Interpretar, from the Portuguese Association. The first time we wrote about this community was in 2012. But was just last year in a meeting between a technician from ICMBio, the Brazilian entity for management of protected areas, that we had in August. That was the spark to activate this idea. The tries that we had before was not successful, and we start with very strong motivation to work and to do something, even without any money involved, without any needs for financial investments. So we are using free tools, and this is the free participation, and of course lots of voluntary work for this. We are using tools for communication, like Zoom, and we are using WhatsApp to connect better the network. There are a strong effort to integrate so many diversity of differences between countries, between the time zones, between the political problems and even social problems that everyone are facing in different countries. And sometimes the participation in meetings are irregular due to personal problems, professional problems, that is not possible for people to participate, because we have to make meetings at the same time in complete different places. Someone are preparing the lunch and the other ones are at the dinner. So it's quite difficult to find an hour that is compatible with all the personal and professional agendas. And sometimes there are a problem that is the internet connections in some areas of Brazil, for example, or Mozambique, that are frequently a problem to have communications, and it's normal to have someone trying to enter in a meeting more than 10 times for each meeting. So there are contexts completely different. And the results, it's only 1 year of work, or a little less than 1 year of work. We have the first online meeting in November 2020, and the first webinar in February this year. But we are currently with 28 members, with 9 meetings and 7 webinars. That is, I think, quite interesting for this first year of work. And some projects, we are beginning the translation of reference books. We are trying to see how to do that and make the first tests, and trying, as Carla said, trying to find a way to create a small technical journal or newsletter to share information between all the countries. And we are looking that there are very special contexts in all of these countries that imply significant adaptations of heritage interpretations. For example, in Brazil, many of interpreters in local communities are people that never been in a school. So they need the support to work with interpretation, but it's not possible to be a support that result, for example, from writing materials. So and the people that will be trained, this kind of guides in the communities, many times have not access to publications or to materials in other languages than Portuguese. So this is a quite special context where we are working. But it's very interesting, the sharing of enriching experiences. There are lots of different visions of the management of natural resources and the way they can use it to make stories and to make interpretation for visitors, and how to involve the local community. It's a very interesting subject in our meetings, but also the enlargement and the concept of the concepts and contexts of where we can use the heritage interpretation. But also another thing interesting is how to make training of these different contexts. And sometimes there are requests for collaboration or to help in specific problems, and this is something that are already working. This is an image of some of our meetings. It's meetings that normally are very interesting because there are a huge diversity of people, and it's not because we have regular meetings. I think we are creating some kind of familiar work. So we are waiting for the moment that we can be together again and sharing how are you, or how are your family, the problem you had last month, how can you resolve that? So there are a very interesting atmosphere in this kind of meetings. And this is a list of the first webinars. The first about a comparison was a master thesis this exposition about the interpretive expositions in 2 protected areas, one in Portugal and the other in Brazil. And then we passed to the problem of community tourism in protected areas in Mozambique. And the third one was about a place in south of Brazil, Morro Redondo, where they have lots of problems with the legalization of products and about the valorization of their heritage. A communication about the 20 years of experience in community-based tourism in north of Brazil, in Amazonia. Another webinar about bird watching and environmental interpretation. And then we pass for a different phase with more theoretical issues, like how to get from principles to the practice of heritage interpretation using planning. And the last one was about the principles of Tilden. That was quite interesting, because we start with practice and then we feel the need to have more strong share about the theoretical aspects of heritage interpretation for all the countries. And this is an image of some of the webinars. In 5 of May, that is the International Day of Lusóphony, we decided to make a post for social networks about heritage interpretation. And this was produced by different countries. It was the first external work that we done. We are doing small steps in this kind of work, but I think it's interesting. And of course, we have these 2 books of Tilden and Samham, and we are trying to see if it's like our dream to have these 2 books translated to Portuguese. We will try to do this as soon as possible, as soon as we can. And this is some kind of conclusions about factors and figures, some kind of results. And this is the importance to have a work in different Portuguese-speaking countries, because it is easy to see that we have particular needs, but also a great potential for use of the interpretation. The different contexts demands also a different approaches or applications of heritage interpretation. It's urgent it's very urgent to have a plan to expand the knowledge about heritage interpretation in all of these countries. And there are some results that begins to appear. For example, there are a master thesis that are going in Brazil, that in the guy that are doing this thesis discovered this community and was like delight for his work. And now there are different members of the community that are supporting his thesis. That is quite interesting. It is a thesis about environmental interpretation in protected areas in Brazil. And about the plans for the future, we are with 5 countries in 9 countries possible that are Portuguese-speaking countries. We want to expand this number. we have a very informal structure. But if we are thinking to grow this structure, we need to be more formal, and we are thinking about the possibilities to do that. The plan to have the first reference book published in Portuguese language, and the promotion to setting up of groups, and later in the form of associations in all these countries. And then also create training programs that can be used by all the countries. It is very important to create heritage interpretation programs in Portuguese for these countries. So, final remarks. The first point is that is quite important to connect people that are working in different countries. There are very huge diversity, and the spirit of community that we are working, I think it's the major input for the resilience that we can get in this area. If we have a very small number of people working in heritage interpretation, it's very easy to give up. So I think it's very important to have this working, to put everything together, but also a very responsibility to go further in this way. It's important also to have support, and to everyone perceive the support that it's possible to have from other countries. And it's like to have not only a small group working in our country, but we understand that it's important, the feeling of a larger community that can support some problem that appears in each country. And maybe we are in countercurrent of Interpret Europe in the way that Interpret Europe use English as an exclusive communication for interpretation, and we are trying to getting out of the command of English that is very comfortable, because we have texts, we have training, we have everything, but it's not adequate to reach people that are living in all these Portuguese-speaking countries. And is that we have much more than 250 million people, and an area of 10 million square kilometers that demands a lot of responsibility for everyone involved to spread heritage interpretation. All of us, I think, have a feeling that heritage interpretation is something that, if we don't know what it is, it's very strange. But then when we enter in heritage interpretation, we feel the need that everyone knows about that, and everyone can use heritage interpretation in their work. So CLIP, I think it's like a seed, a very small seed that we need to plant everywhere in all this area to produce a different work in everyone that are working with heritage, but also everyone who is working with tourism. And because this can have a very huge impact in the tourism that can be done in all these areas. And I would like to finish with a question that it's something that I think that is very important to connect all these networks. And my question is, what can be made to connect CLIP to Interpret Europe, and even other communities, other networks that can be connected also with Interpret Europe? Thank you very much.
Thank you as well, Carla and Pedro. This is really, really very impressive. And if you are seeing the chat, you'll notice that there are others saying the same thing to you. Now, about your question, are you expecting an answer right now? Because I'm afraid that you might start something like a round table that will eat up to the end of the conference.
Yeah, maybe we can answer the questions from the chat and leave that question open for the future.
That is a good idea as well.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there was one question from Sandy here. Is your network anchored in organizations or individuals so that the network is sustained even if people come and go?
Would you like to answer, Pedro? Or,
yes, I can answer. Yes, we are based in persons, not in institutions. Of course, each one belongs to an institution, but this has something very interesting, that is not necessary to have some kind of connection with institution, and it's easy to receive the persons, but after there are problems because we are not a formal entity. So there are some problems, including for the participation of people. For example, if they are in work time for the meetings, it's an example that we have. So we need to think about the further steps that is necessary to do, and maybe we have to leave this informality and become more institutional. I don't know. We are thinking about that and thinking the pros and cons of that. Yes.
You'll see how it goes. Yes, there is a lot of enthusiasm and excitement about your view of getting out of the command of English. In your case, focusing on Portuguese. Of course, I felt always that Bulgarian needed more attention, but this is another story. And there was also some communication here about the online communication. Sorry, but whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, it has pros and cons, as you said. But there were also comments and probably a question to you that if the case was that you insist on using a more personal contact, which has a lot of advantages, of course, then aren't you afraid, probably afraid is not the right word, but aren't you concerned about not being able to meet in view of these distances?
Yeah, I think I can link that to one of the comments that Sandy also did, that about national network and the international network, because it's like we have two networks in parallel. Of course, the national network, we try to be more a personal one, and you find a lot of constraints, even in such a small country as Portugal. And in fact, what happened was that the international network grew much spontaneous and much quicker because it's online. So you really do have some advantages about the easiness that people can, even with the different times, because as Pedro said, when it's morning here, it's night in Brazil and things like that. We find that the online really brings people together easier, in an easier way. Yeah.
Thank you,